And welcome. Hi. Thank you so much for tuning into this SIFTA Melbourne International Games Week showcase. I am Nicholas, and I'm joined today by Andrew Brophy. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us, man.
Yeah, it's cool. Glad to be here.
Yeah, tremendous to have you. Thank you so much. So, the reason that we have you on today is to talk about a little game called Knuckle Sandwich, which I think is a game that is probably, if you're sort of paying attention to Australian games, on a couple people's radars. But for people that maybe haven't heard of it, in your own words, what would you describe Knuckle Sandwich as?
As far as the story goes, I wouldn't say it's a small game; it's a big game.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the story goes, it's an RPG where you play as a young man who moves to a new town, and he immediately gets caught up in a mystery that spans across multiple dimensions. There's ghouls, goblins, aliens, that kind of thing. I keep doing this, I think. Yeah.
That's fun.
It's like
Talk with
goblins,
your hands. It's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mechanically, it's a turn-based RPG. It's got microgames mixed into the turn-based combat, so it's very fast-paced, very, very out there.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the microgames a little bit more in a second. How long have you been working on the game for?
Depends on when you ask me. So back in 2013,
When did it first enter your mind?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
really.
it's multiple games all mixed together, I'd like to think. Back in 2013, I used to make a lot of really small Flash games, and I made one called Knuckle Sandwich, which is basically the setup, like the story of that is the start of this game that I'm making now. But it was very, very short, just silly little thing. And then I think it was around 2015, I wanted to actually try making a really big game. And I just went back to that and used the same sort of characters and setup and messed around with it a bit. But it wasn't until 2017 that I was like, okay, I'm going to do a Kickstarter. I'm going to get funding. I'm actually going to plan this out and do a big thing. So yeah, it depends. This version of it since 2017. So however long that was ago.
What was it that made you want to draw from that period specifically to kind of build out the visual identity of Knuckle Sandwich?
I think it's kind of two things. Like, to me, that was the games that I played. I think it was actually the last period of games that I played where I wasn't making games. Like, afterwards, because I got into making games really, really young. So that was the last one. That was like this sweet spot of games I was really into before actually making them myself. And there's so many of my favorite games that I really really dug that made me fall in love with the medium from that time. I think my first console that I owned was a Game Boy Color, and then I got a Game Boy Advance a few years after that. So yeah, I guess that's why. The other thing is I just really like 2D games personally. Like, it's a style I just like. Nothing against 3D games, and obviously my game has some 3D elements, but yeah, like, if anything, I think it's kind of like end of Game Boy Advance, start of Nintendo DS era is kind of what it feels like. It feels like it could be onto either of those.
Could you explain kind of like why you've gone for this sort of high, like 3D moments in a largely 2D game?
Mostly it's because it looks cool, right?
Yeah, right.
I'd like to think, like, I feel with this very specific sort of subgenre of RPG that's kind of cropping up now, and has been for the last few years, so many of them kind of go for this meta sort of angle, or they have this thing where, like, you as the player are a character, and then the character that you play as is someone else, that sort of thing. Whereas I'm not doing that. I have nothing against that, but I just don't think you should do something like that unless you can do something interesting with it. So I think with the 3D scenes, for me, they're more of a, like, kind of take you out and kind of talk to you more about, like, what's actually happening in the game. It's you and the narrator character very much. Like, you are meant to be the main character, right? That's meant to be representing you. It's not going to, like, pull a fast one on you and everyone turns to the camera and says, no, you, the player.
Yeah.
Right?
You're culpable.
So those scenes, it's like, how dare you do bad things?
Yeah. Jumped on a goblin.
Yeah, right.
Why?
So those 3D scenes are meant to be more of like they kind of like bookend certain parts of the game, and it's kind of like coming back and it's you and the narrator character, who is a character in the game as well, like kind of talking. And
is the blue-skinned fellow?
Yeah, he's named the bus driver. Yeah.
Interesting. Is this game semi-autobiographical in a sense? Like, would you say that you view it in that way? Because that's kind of how it feels, at least when you kind of get a couple of those sort of winking moments in some of the stuff that you've released about it so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think you could work for as long as you can on a game like this and not have it be about yourself, right? it becomes about the process of making a game almost.
Whether you like it or not, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like to lean into that, I think, quite a bit. Um, but yeah, I lost my train of thought here with this.
Totally. I know we're jumping around little bit, but just to move back to the mini games as part of the combat, what drew you to that form of combat?
I like it's like two parts. I like very standard kind of video game experiences. I like turn-based RPGs. Even if like some of the older ones now feel a bit more boring because like we're so used to those systems that are in everything now. And then at the same time, I'm very into WarioWare and those sort of experiences, like how fast-paced and frantic and all over the place it is, right? So it wasn't really like I was like, okay, I like these two, let's put them together. But it just kind of happened, I suppose. It felt the rest of the game already has so many different art style and tone changes. It worked really well to me to put them together as the combat, to keep things interesting as well.
Is it a way of maybe like testing yourself slightly as a game maker to just sort of come up with these bite-sized yet still engaging sort of micro games?
Absolutely. I think I always like pushing myself just as an artist, right? So working on something like this, you can just push everything to the limit. Like that's the one thing I'm doing in this game. I'm working on it for so long now. I might as well try and maximize how much of it I can make.
How many points over the course of the development did it sort of balloon? Like were there key times where it was like, okay, it's going to be this small thing. Oh, maybe I'll tack on this element or this mechanic or this section. Oh, maybe I'll add on this. Is that kind of what it's done over time, or until you find? I think you mentioned actually in 2017 is when it kind of was like, this is going to be something significant.
Yeah, well, how I always kind of see it is that like working the game is kind of more like as a gardener, right? Like as opposed to an architect, where I know like I'm planting the seeds to be a tree and what kind of tree it'll be, but the exact shape it'll be isn't clear to me. Like I kind of keep pruning things as it goes along, right? Like I know how the game ends. I know the sort of the scenes and the beats I want to have, but exactly how they turn out, I haven't got planned. And I think that's one of the freedoms you have as like a predominantly solo developer, right? But yeah, I think there's a few times it ballooned unintentionally. Like I think this just happens when you make something huge for the first time, like this. But like I like it's chapter based for a specific reason where I'm like, okay, I know I can't go too far if there's a set number of chapters that I've always known about, but they're still so big. Like I cut one completely and it's still a very, very long game. So yeah, I think several times it really just blew up. But I've reined it in. You can beat the game now, so it's just finishing.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah,
that's good that we'll be able to beat it. Yeah, that's good news.
Yeah,
you heard it here first. When I was looking at stuff about Knuckle Sandwich, I noticed that you started sort of promoting it on TikTok and putting clips up on TikTok.
Recently, yeah.
And I'm not like I don't use TikTok terribly myself. I do have the app on my phone just out of sheer morbid curiosity. But, how is TikTok as a social media tool for promoting games?
I think it feels fairly early stages in the sense that there's just not that many people on there that I've seen. Like there are obviously some huge accounts and some people who do really well. Just as a social network, like with anything can blow up. It's wild, Like for example, with Twitter, I've been using it I think since like 2009 or something, right? And like both my games account and my account have like got several thousand followers. It does pretty well. It's had a few like really good tweets, but nothing compared to like what you can do with TikTok, right? Like I think it was within like a month it gained like 2,000 followers. It's just like, which is I guess not huge in the grand scheme of things, but still like after only really promoting it on the app itself. So yeah, I don't really take that too seriously as a work thing. Like I just wanted to have another outlet. I think I personally don't use Twitter as much to push the game or anything, or just myself. So I thought it would be fun just to try something different, especially one that's like a purely visual medium.
Would you recommend it to other game developers? Like, do you think it's a worthwhile tool in the tool belt?
Yeah, it's hard to say. Like I said, like I obviously made videos and put effort into it to make sure, like to see if it would work, and some did. Some took off pretty well. I don't know.
I find it kind of interesting. I was scrolling through some of the videos, and some of the Knuckle Sandwich ones have done pretty well, but the one that has done the best is one that isn't Knuckle Sandwich related. It's the Beyblades game.
Yeah,
with like 48,000 views, which I mean in TikTok terms is still largely pocket change, but like at least within the context of a smaller account, I found that really interesting. Was that weird to watch that, to just have it be like this, like tiny little, what seemed like a little a fun little project between you and your partner,
Yeah.
which became kind of like the sort of the blow up thing from the account?
Yeah, it's pretty weird. I think, especially comparing to Twitter so much, it feels like if you want a tweet to do really well, you have like this small window from when you post it, and you have to get a specific time, make sure you use the certain words and everything, and then it's still purely up to luck, right, with the algorithm. But with TikTok, I posted that, it gained a couple of hundred within like the afternoon. I was like, oh, okay, that's okay. And then I went to bed and woke up and it had like 30,000 or something, right? Like it feels like I don't know, it's just got this like wildly good algorithm, and so many millions of people use it every day.
Completely.
So yeah, it's just weird. Like I don't really know what to think about it. I'm like, this is. I
No, it
think
is weird.
it's good, but like
it is really weird trying to because I guess it's like TikTok, any social media social media platform wants engagement, but it seems like TikTok is just has somehow like cracked the code of, I don't know, just like engineering that stuff and promoting as many things as possible to as many people as possible. And when you scroll through that, it's so easy to find. I don't know. It's just fast and easy, and I don't know. It's smart as fuck. But anyway, I just want to ask you also about your partnership with Superhot Presents on Knuckle Sandwich. How did that come about? What has that experience been like?
It just kind of happened, which sounds a bit funny, but like it's true. So initially, the first people that they signed with was Frog Detective, which is also from Melbourne.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and I'm pretty good friends with like the team behind that, and so it was before the whole thing was announced. They were saying like, oh hey, we know like you'd be interested in this sort of thing. They're interested. Like, I think they were talking with Superhot as well about other developers who might be interested. So they put me in contact, and we got talking, and it just seemed like a good fit. I think they want to work with smaller teams making, I suppose, like weirder stuff or slightly more offbeat sort of games. And so I just kind of fit with what they were looking for, I suppose.
Completely.
Yeah.
Sort of like the A24 of video game houses or something like that at this point.
Yeah.
So I mean, just before we wrap up, with Knuckle Sandwich, it's a huge game. It seems like there are so many different ambitious parts of it. For you as a developer, what's kind of like the thing that you want players to sort of take away from Knuckle Sandwich having played it? What are some of the, like, either thematic beats or maybe gameplay ideas or something that you're trying to say with it that you hope comes across in the final game?
I don't know about specific themes, but like we kind of said, the game, it's me, right? Like every character is just me. I feel like you could. It sounds almost sort of selfish, but it's like you could. I feel after playing it, you could know me so much more, right? And I think even if it's not specifically meant to be like me, like as this interesting person or people have to care about, I think it's still kind of cool that you can play a game that's so offbeat and still feel like you can know someone, right? Like, to me, it's very personal, even if the story itself goes very offbeat into very, wild directions.
How do you, people make personal games, all the time now. It's like, it's if anything, a fertile ground for anyone who wants to make their first game. Just write about yourself. You'll find something interesting to say. Were there any moments in the development of Knuckle Sandwich, where you found a line within yourself where you're like, no, I'm going to keep that off to the side. This is this story. How do you sort of, as a writer and as a developer making something that is so much about yourself, how do you walk that line?
I just include it all, honestly.
Okay.
I kind of think it's interesting that, like, to me, I can look at a specific, because I work on the game kind of chronologically, like I don't jump all over the place of each chapter. And because I spent so many years on it, I can look at like a certain part of the game and say like, oh, I know what I was doing when I made this, right? So like, obviously this is all just kind of like private stuff that like I'll only really take in, that wouldn't even be that interesting to like the average player. But I think it's cool that like there's these little pockets of my life that like the game gets progressively more, I don't want to say like more like grown up or anything, but like, I spent like my whole 20s working on this game. Like how I kind of see things changes.
It's almost like game development as a diary in a way.
It's weird,
if you put that to people who have worked on a game for a long period of time, they'd be like, yeah, of course. Like, if anything, is this a sentiment that you see people maybe talk about, being like, when they reflect on the development of a game, there's like a memory linkage there between things?
Yeah, absolutely. Like this is just a weird digital monument to my life now, right? Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
completely. Well, I think that is the sort of strange note that we'll maybe wrap this one up on. But Andrew, thank you so much for making the time for the interview today. Knuckle Sandwich is out when?
eventually when it happens.
Eventually, coming 2022
Hopefully,
maybe, if we're
yeah.
lucky.
Probably it's coming. It's getting there. It's nearly done.
It's getting there. It's getting there, boys. Don't you worry about
Yeah.
it. Tremendous. Thank you so much, Andrew. Extremely excited for the game. And stay tuned for the rest of I mean, you, Andrew, obviously, hopefully you're watching right now, but everyone else who is also watching, stay tuned for the rest of the showcase. We have some, I'm sure, very cool things coming up. And we'll catch you later. Thanks, Andrew.
Cool. Thank you. See ya.